Welcome to Eye of the Storm, our St. John's video series presented by Nobull. Welcome back to Eye of the Storm. St. John's men's basketball about to embark on their conference journey in the Big East as play starts this week. And joining me to talk about that and preview Big East play is my guy Zach Braziller here with me in studio. Zach, what's going on?
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing good. You, no more Bahamas, no more trips any place else for you for now, just within the Big East. Are you a little disappointed about that?
I'd like to go back to Costa Rica, man. With rain and it's cold.
You know what? I forgot about that. You had a trip to the Bahamas, then a trip to Costa Rica, not for work. You've been living the life.
85 degrees every day. Can we go back to that?
Look, you know I like that. My family's from the islands. You know I like that kind of life. But you've been living that life every day. I'm a little jealous.
My next two trips are Omaha and Providence. Well, Providence and Omaha. So I'm going to need a few jackets.
Not quite the same. Not quite the same there. But we're going to talk about St. John's and them going into conference play. Now, you know this, St. John's, they're not over with non-conference play, but thus far they've had a solid record, 8-2. How would you evaluate their play thus far? What stood out to you in terms of their play in conference play, and what are the lessons that this team can take from non-conference play into conference play?
You know, it's kind of been a weird non-conference because they're 8-2. They have they're 14 in Ken Palm. They have really good metrics, but they don't have that good win. You know, they lost their two games to projected tournament teams, Baylor and Georgia, by a combined 4 points. Now, their other 8, which does include wins over Kansas State, New Mexico, and Virginia, they've all won by at least 13. So they've been impressive for the most part, especially the second halves, of blowing out everyone else. But despite right now being St. John's is projected pretty safely in the tournament, they don't have those big wins to kind of back that up. Now, can Kansas State become a good win by the end of the year? Potentially. They have struggled, but they have a ton of talent. Can New Mexico get it going? They did beat UCLA early, but they also lost to Arizona State, lost to in-state rival New Mexico State. So, you know, those are two teams I think, as the year goes on, might be looked at as better wins than they are now. But, yeah, look, I think St. John's is in a good place. You would like to have one of those Georgia or Baylor wins. But for the most part, I think, you know, St. John fans are mostly happy with where this team is.
Yeah, it should be. 8-2 record. Can't be too mad about that. Well, I guess you can always be mad. Somebody can always be mad about it. But there is an 8-2 record. But now they move on to conference play, as I said, this week, starting Tuesday night against DePaul. What are some of the challenges that St. John's will face in the Big East in terms of style and specific matchups? What are some of the challenges they might face in this conference?
Look, you're going up in competition. I know the league is down. It hasn't had a great non-conference, but you're still playing quality teams for the most part every game. Now, I think one area that they've really got to focus on is these slow starts. For the most part, I think outside of Baylor and Virginia, they really haven't played well in the first halves. Fordham, too. They played a good first half Fordham. But a lot of these games, you know, especially these guarantee games against, you know, Quinnipiac, Wagner, Bryant, they've struggled in the first half. And they're talented enough where they can turn it on in the second half. You play in good teams, you play a bad first half, you're going to find yourself down. You're going to find yourself down maybe 10, 12, 14 points, and it's going to be tough to come back. They got to find a way to start better. Now, as part of that, Davon Smith hasn't been starting, and to me, he's one of their most valuable players. Maybe. But they definitely got to figure out these starts. The second halves have been terrific. Patino obviously makes great adjustments, but for a lot of these games, they've kind of been sluggish.
Yeah, you've seen those slow starts, and wonder if they can clean that up as they head to Big East play. Now, I got to ask you about this because you recently wrote about Zuby Ejiofor, and you talked about how he's basically been the MVP of this team in terms of their opponents and what they did during non-conference play. Now they're in conference play. Who do you think needs to elevate their game as the Red Storm faces Big East competition?
You know, I think there are a few guys, but number one is Kadari Richmond. He's been very up and down, has struggled a little bit, kind of adjusting to new teammates, adjusting to the new way this team plays, the pace. He's had some good games. He's also had some down games. You'd like to see him be more aggressive. You know, he's had a few really good ones. You know, the end of Baylor, he was really good. Virginia, he was good. New Mexico, he was good. But he's then had some really quiet ones, and I think there's still an adjustment process going on. But for this team to get to where it wants to be and to be a real factor in March, they're going to need the Kadari Richmond from last year, and we really haven't seen that yet.
Do you like at least the way he's trending? Do you expect him to step that game up? Because we've been talking about him since we started talking about St. John's this season. Do you really expect him to try to step his game up here in conference play?
Yeah, look, I think he's going to get better. If you look at the big games, he's mostly played well. lately he's getting to the rim. He's just not finishing. It's bizarre because this has never really been a guy who's struggled finishing off layups or drives. But lately, he especially these last two Kansas State Bryant, he's been missing a lot of bunnies, and that's something he's got to really, to me, figure out. Because if he's going to be finishing off drives, then teams are now it's going to create openings for other guys. And look, he's their first team All-League player in the preseason. They need him to play like that. To me, right now, probably the three best players have been Zuby, R.J. Lewis, and Davon Smith. I think those are right now their three best players, and that's a surprise because if you would have asked me before the season who's going to be one of their three best, I would have definitely had Kadari in there, and he just hasn't been. Now look, he does a lot of things really good. He's a really good defensive rebounder. He distributes. He's a good defender with size. He allows them to play three guards. But they need to see the Kadari that people thought was who was one of the best players in the portal, and we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we see that now that Big East play is starting. And speaking of Big East play starting, you talked about how this is a step up in competition, right? This is a conference that is still to be respected. Preseason favorites, well, you know this, it was Marquette, UConn, Creighton. Those were the teams that many people are looking at. How do you think St. John's stacks up against those teams in terms of the preseason favorites in the Big East?
I think you go in, I would put Marquette 1, UConn 2, and I think St. John's is 3. Creighton lost one of its best players, Pop Isaacs, for the year. Even before his injury, they hadn't been playing well. They had a shaky non-conference. I think St. John's is at worst the third best team in this league. There's no reason this team does not go win 14, 15 league games and is like a 5-6 seed in the NCAA tournament. They're going to be the favorite in the majority of these games. The league is set up for them to have a really big year. Are they as good as Marquette or UConn? I think Marquette is the best team. I think UConn and I think St. John's is right there with UConn. I do. UConn's a better offensive team. I think St. John's is a better defensive team. I think St. John's athleticism and length will give UConn problems. Those are 4 games, the UConn and Marquette games. St. John's to me, has to split those. You split those, then you take your care of business everywhere else.
Right.
And I think this team is looking at a 5 or a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament and a top 3 finish in this league. You've seen all these teams in the league struggle, and you watch them. I watch them all play. I don't think there's any question St. John's is the third best team in this league on paper.
All right, hopefully St. John's can be happy about that. Top 3 finish is what Zach is predicting. But here's what fans also are going to do, Zach. They always are going to look at the calendar. They're going to want to circle a game on the calendar that's like a must watch. This is the one we have to watch. Or it could be multiple games. What do you think is the game or games that fans should circle on the calendar to say, hey, these are the must-watch games that I have to see St. John's play this season?
It's all about February. Marquette and UConn both come to the Garden. UConn, on a Sunday afternoon. Those are going to be huge games. Those are going to be games that could really determine this team's March fate because there aren't a lot of marquee games in this league this year. At Creighton, New Year's Eve is one. We would have said at Providence, but Providence has fallen off, so I don't see that necessarily as a marquee game. The Seton Hall game at Seton Hall will be just because Kadari Richards returned. But to me, the 4 games with UConn and Marquette are the 4 games you don't want to miss, especially the 2 ones here at the Garden. Huge games for this program, huge games for this team. It'll be interesting to see what their record is by mid-February when Marquette comes in, and then later near the end of February when UConn comes in. Because look, St. John's, you have home for DePaul, at Providence, at Creighton. Then you start the new year where you're home for Butler. You have at Xavier, home for Villanova. These are all games that to me they maybe not easily could win. In the past when you're going to Xavier, Creighton, you would say, well, St. John's has a puncher's chance to win that game. No, not anymore. This year, these are games they easily can win if they play well. And look, like I said, there's no excuse for them not to be a top 3 team in this league and to win, upwards of 14 or 15 league games.
Okay, so you say no excuse for them to be a top 3 team in this league, because I was going to ask you about that. You've answered that question. You think they can be a top 3 team 100%. In this league. But I think the money question that people want to know is, can they truly contend for the Big East regular season title? Can they do that?
Yeah, I think they can. Look, I would pick Marquette to win the league. I just love their continuity. Cam Jones is a National Player of the Year candidate. They've been terrific. They, so far beat Purdue, win at Maryland. I know they lost to Dayton the other day, but Dayton's, to me, is a very good team, so there's nothing wrong with that. I would go Marquette right now as the favorite, but I don't think Marquette's going 18-2 in this league. I think, I think UConn, Marquette, and St. John's will kind of all be there in February battling it out. I think St. John's could absolutely split with those two teams and could beat those two teams. There's no question. I think they can contend. Will they win the league? I would probably go Marquette, but I think they can.
Hey, I feel like if you're a St. John's fan, you got to be happy about that. They have a chance. You're saying they have a chance.
Yes.
That's a top 3 team, have a chance to win the league. Don't think it's that bad. That is Zachary Brazil. Does a fantastic job covering St. John's Red Storm basketball for the New York Post. We thank you for joining us on Eye of the Storm.